Righto. Okay. Welcome to the January Ordinary Council meeting of Dubbo Regional Council. I advise that this meeting is being streamed live to the internet. All those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements, and upon joining these online meetings, you accept the condition that your image may be recorded and streamed to the internet, as well as being retained in the archive of the recorded council meetings and standing committee meetings. I now open the January Ordinary Council meeting, the time being 5:30 p.m. First of all, we have the prayer by Councillor Butler, please.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this new year. Lord, we just commit it to you. We pray that you would grant us wisdom and that you'd grant us unity, Lord, together. And overall, Lord, let us all that we do be glorifying your name in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. The acknowledgement of country by Councillor Cowley, please.
Thank you, and please join me in acknowledging the Wiradjuri people, the traditional custodians of the land where we gathered tonight. I'd like to pay my respect and extend that to elders past and present of the Wiradjuri nation, and extend the respect to other Aboriginal people from other nations present here with us tonight.
Thank you. There are no leaves of absence. We move on to item CCL 25/2, conflicts of interest. Do any councillors have any conflicts that they wish to declare? There being none, we'll move on to public forum, item CCL 25/3. I'll now run through the rules for public forum. Speakers will have 5 minutes to speak. When you come forward, please state your name and the item that you are speaking on. When there's 30 seconds remaining, there will be a bell. At 5 minutes, you'll hear the bell multiple times. The microphone will be turned off and you will conclude speaking. Registered speakers will be asked to speak first, followed by members of the gallery who may also wish to speak if time allows. Gallery members should refrain from any disruptive behaviour, including clapping or jeering. I'll now call on the following registered speakers. Mr. Greg Kilby, please. Yep, up to the microphone there, please. And
so if you're not aware of who I am, I have been in Dubbo for about 8 years, and I've been in Gilgandra and Coonamble and been quite a good farmer and good investor, and got educated children. One of them owns the Clock Tower building, a couple of doctors. Okay, so we've got a problem, a worldwide problem with global warming and climate change. It's going to affect a lot of things. It's burnt between 10 and $15 billion worth of houses in America. Insurance companies are going to wear this, are they? Or they're going to double our insurance for average person in Australia to try and get his house and have a couple of kids and get it paid for and not have it burnt and don't get any insurance or can't insure it. You got that? Okay. The new council representatives, I imagine they're smart, energetic, educated and prepared to do a job. And they had quite a lot of other people that could have been voted in as well. Okay, so this is the big thing. The house owners in Australia have got to be looked after, especially the young ones with debts and little children. Righto, we've now got, I'm off Regan Park. I bought the first $1 million house in Dubbo, if you don't know. I'll tell you now. Okay, we've got a problem down there with fire danger. I've been chipping the weeds and the neighbours are out mowing with their lawn mowers to get the grass and fire danger back from their backyards. You got that? Now, we should be able to have a bit of a group in the Shire elected people to look after the fire danger and to represent the area to the fire brigade people and work out if there's too much fire danger and have it removed, or have a plan to have it removed and reduce the risk of fire burning houses between Wellington and Narromine. But we're mainly, myself and my neighbours, are worried about Regan Park, and they're out there with their lawn mowers mowing the grass back. Okay. So can we get this body? Can we get 3 or 4 people on this body? I was at Coonamble and they used to have jobs for each one in the council. Look after the sewerage, rubbish, potholes, you know, all different jobs in the area. So I don't know whether you've got allocated to your Shire elected people a separate job. Have you got that? Have they, any of the Shire representatives, have they got separate jobs?
Yeah, Mr. Kilby, it's not a Q&A, so councillors will listen and they can ask a question later, but they don't give an answer during the thing. So, yep.
Yeah, so that's my
carry
idea.
on. Thanks.
And also the people in Regan Park would like to have a group that they can talk to, and if the fire danger is bad, they can get someone to come and do something about it. So this insurance thing, this is a big thing. This insurance thing, it's going to be a big thing with climate change, because the people who give you house insurance, they don't have to give you house insurance, do they? They're people, they're investors like some of you people here today. They're trying to make some money by charging for the fire insurance. So they're not going to lose millions of dollars to give you a insurance on your house. Now, when you go to get your insurance, say you got your house insured for $500,000 and it gets burnt, one of the big bills is to cart the bloody rubbish away from your yard before they can start building. So they got insurance for $500,000 and they end up with $30,000 or $40,000 bill to start off with to cart the asbestos and all this stuff away to get started. So they're out of money right from the word go. Very important to try and get this fire resistant down between Wellington and Narromine and through Dubbo. Have I got any time left, have I? Okay.
That's right on 5 minutes, Mr. Kilby. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, thank you. I'll look into it for you. Next, we have Mr. Ian Selby up to the microphone. Mr. Selby, you missed my little speech before, so there's 5 minutes. At 4 minutes 30, a bell will be rung. At 5 minutes, the bell will continue to ring and the microphone will be turned off. That'll be the conclusion of the time. Thank you. And please state your name and tell us the issue and what you'd like to talk about. Thank you.
Ian Selby, 23 Walker Crescent, Wellington. My issues are the gutter had a big hole in it. And you said you didn't have enough money and you filled it up full of tar. It wasn't even half a bucket of cement. I pay my rates every year. Number one issue. Number two issue, the price of you giving on our properties out there. I could have signed a protest, but I'm up to sell it because I've had a gut full of out there. My house has been broken into 4 times, set fire once, kicked in the side fence, burnt me ute, pulled out the front fence, blah, blah. Could go on for ages. Got nothing to do with you guys. Right. Number 3 issue is me water meter. 4 times I've paid for that. And you set me a new bill for $372. Well, I'm glad to see you guys in court because I'm not paying it. Now you've all seen me face. You've got insurance, I've got insurance. For me to claim that on insurance, it'll cost $1,000. So far, $55,000 of damages have been done to my house. Nothing to do with you guys, but this water meter does me. My question is to you guys, with this water meter, yous own it. Is that correct?
So it's not a Q&A. You make a statement and councillors can
Okay.
ask questions at the end. So
If
we'll
yous
listen.
own it, yous can pay for it because you got insurances. And that's about it. Because I'm one very angry resident and I'm sick of it. Thank you, people.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public gallery that would like to speak? No, there's not. That concludes public forum. The next item is item CCL 25/4, confirmation of minutes. The first item of business, confirmation of minutes of the proceedings of the extraordinary council meeting held on 4 December 2024 and the ordinary council meeting held on 10 December 2024. Do I have someone to move those, please? Councillor Chowdhury moves those, seconded by Councillor Toynton. Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury, would you like to speak to those?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other debate, councillors? There being none, I'll put that. Councillors, the electronic voting is open. Please cast your votes. Councillors, I will close the voting. Motion carried unanimously. Notices of motion, item CCL 25/5, review of all sister city relationships. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to move your motion, please?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
And a seconder, councillors, seconded by Councillor Wright. Thank you. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sister cities are an incredibly important part of the community here in Dubbo and of the former Wellington, which those sister cities have now been rolled into this one. We've got a number of sister cities that are very active. Minakama has been active for 35 years. Councillor Ivy and myself were over there at the end of last year helping them celebrate 35 years. In fact, I've been over there 5 times to Japan to celebrate our relationship that we have with Japan. We've got a good relationship with Wujiang in China. That's been inactive for the last few years due to COVID-19. And then certainly there's been some requests from DFAT to make sure we've got a new MOU signed with them. Having those sister cities active and making sure those relationships are active is very important. But we've got a number of other relationships that have been signed over the years that aren't active at the moment, and they may be inactive and need some push from us, or maybe some discussions with those other inactive cities, or maybe they're not relevant anymore. We've got about 9 relationships in total, really of which only 2 have been active over the years. This is an opportunity for our staff to reach out to all of those cities to see whether those relationships are active, to see whether we can rejuvenate those. That would be ideal, to rejuvenate those and make sure we've got active relationships. Or if they're not active, if they're going to be dormant, then why would we leave them on our books and have a discussion with those various cities to see whether or not it's mutually beneficial for both of us to end those relationships, not being done from one direction, but being done as a mutual process, because again, it doesn't make sense to have those relationships sitting on the books with nothing happening from those. Again, hopefully we'll rejuvenate some of those and have more active city relationships, get the MOU signed so DFAT's happy, and make sure that we continue on exploring the culture of other cities and exploring the culture of Dubbo with those other cities. So that's my recommendation, to go through and explore those. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other debate, councillors? Councillor Ivy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd support the motion specifically because, and I guess I'm being a little bit parochial here, but Wellington Shire Council did have a sister city relationship with a prefecture in Osaka. I think that's been let lapse, or I don't know whether it's been let lapse, but I'm not even quite sure of what the status is. And so I see this motion as at least bringing that to the fore. Let's look at it. Let's look at the status of that sister city relationship, and then as a council decide what we want to do with it from there. So I think that overall review of the sister city relationships that we have can only bring some good and rationalise and perhaps hopefully rejuvenate some of those the relationships. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Cowley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support the motion because I do think that the sister city relationships are very important, and I have seen the value, particularly of the Minakamo sister city relationship. But I do think going forward, and I like the idea of revisiting some of these, I do think going forward we could also look at perhaps some more relationships that are more culturally aligned and reflect a changing demographic in our own community here. Places, for instance, we have a very active and growing contingent of residents from the subcontinent, and also a lot of people from Pacific Islands. So I think those sorts of relationships might generate some greater engagement in the Sister City program, but I'm happy to support this just in the interests of assessing the situation.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm actually happy to support the motion. However, I've got a few questions. I'm a little bit concerned about the point 3 of point 3, which is politely discontinue ties with cities where mutual engagement is no longer feasible, which I understand that. I think that's, that has to happen, but maybe the language used could be potentially different. Like politely discontinue could actually probably pose a negative connotation is probably what I'm trying to say. But I like the idea of what Councillor Cowley spoke about, engaging other areas. So just a few comments around point 3 of point 3 and engaging a broader group. But how do then we manage if there's that's a question for me to council. How would we manage if there becomes a lot of sister city relationships? So just curious. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that a question of the CEO? CEO?
Yeah, so I guess under current budgets, we've allocated it largely for the Minakamo relationship, Wuzhang, based on geopolitical things and advice from DFATs, somewhat in abeyance, but typically we've funded that as well. So we haven't funded others per se. Toyama in Japan, which was the Wellington, since the merger, there was a visit by Toyama and there was a visit back to by the then mayor. This is two terms ago. So there was some form of relationship there. Funnily enough, they were a merged council as well, so we shared the pain straight after the merger. But they're not. But it's not really funded per se. So in terms of, say, school visits and what have you. So I guess to your question, if there are others that we don't know yet, maybe that will be a budget decision. I guess it depends on the depth of the relationship. You probably wouldn't move to a Minakamo level of relationship straight away. So there would be time to build an understanding of what we might want to fund in the future.
Thank you. Any other debate, councillors? Councillor Toynton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. Do we have any indication, like we've got the active ones of Minakamo and up until recently Wuzhang, China, do we have any indication of when we actively engaged with any of these other sister cities that we have? I think Councillor Dickinson said we had 9 in total. So my question is, do we have any, when was the last time we engaged with any of the others? Thank you.
Thank you. To the CEO.
Yeah, just touched on Toyama in Japan. So that in the last probably 7 years, there was some interactions there. The only other one I'm aware of is Newcastle sounded them out about whether they were interested in restarting. They wanted us to start back at the beginning of a bureaucratic process. So at the risk of exceeding my authority, I said, thanks, but no thanks. We don't want to, if you're not interested in restarting what we already had, we don't want to jump through the hoops to go through again. But this resolution, I guess, would enact me to go through that, and then we can sound out what the appetite is on both sides of the fence.
Further debate? I'll just quickly say, look, reading through here and having a bit of a look at everything that's going on, the idea that would basically put it to some people that we would discontinue ties, it doesn't really strike me as being highly diplomatic, and there's no real explanation of what an active and a dormant relationship is, and there seems to be a bit of an assumption that every sister city relationship would be full-time or full-on exchange like we do with Minakamo. That seems to be, talking to other people, the exception rather than the rule with the exchanges and the Japanese gift of a Japanese garden and those sort of things. Particularly strong relationship there with Minakamo, but a lot of these other places, imagine if 6 cities came back and said, yeah, we want to do the full like Minakamo thing like what you do there, and suddenly we're saying, oh, we're really only contacting you because we wanted to chop it off. I think that would be better off, if that's what council wants to do, would be better off being upfront rather than sort of going about it with, oh, would you like to discontinue ties? And then if they say yes, then it's like, oh, actually, we don't really want to do that. So I'm just pretty concerned about some of the bits and pieces from point 3. And I note that Warringah has been merged into Northern Beaches Council, and it's a bit of a shame about Newcastle not really wanting to do stuff there, because that might be an opportunity where kids from our region that don't have the money to go to Japan on international exchange would be able to go over and have a look around a big city, have a look at the university, go to the beach, those sort of things, which would be very beneficial to a lot of the kids from here that don't get to participate in the Minakamo exchange. So I just am a bit worried that other cities may want to say, oh, well, yeah, we want to do the whole Minakamo thing. We've seen what you've got going there, and that we're not being upfront. But there also is a bit of a misunderstanding, lack of understanding from my part, as when we signed up to some of these sister city relationships, what was the actual intent of those? Was it an intent to have a full-blown exchanges and building gardens and those sort of things, or was it just as a friendly type thing as they were when they started up? So getting a report back, point 1 would be fine with me, but I just am a bit concerned about point 3. So rather than splitting the motion up or whatever, I'll just vote against the whole thing. But we really would need to decide what is an active partnership, and do we really expect every sister city relationship to be on the level that it is with Minakamo, and who said it has to be? So there's some of the concerns that I have, and why I'll vote against it. But having been to Minakamo on an exchange as a chaperone, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago maybe, that is very worthwhile, and it would be good to have something for kids that can't actually join in on that. So something with a Newcastle might be good, or Wollongong, or somewhere that we could find. Thank you. Councillor Dickerson, right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A few points there just to go through. I certainly agree with Councillor Cowley. There's potential there for some other relationships, but I think the first step, which is where we're at now, is to look at what we've got now with 9 current relationships. Let's make sure they're all appropriate, make sure they're correct for Dubbo, and then, as Councillor Cowley said, start exploring some of those other opportunities, because there's certainly a different flavour to Dubbo compared to, say, 35 years ago when the Minakamo relationship was formed. So that makes a lot of sense, but it also makes sense to tidy up our house before we go further. The Newcastle example that the CEO mentioned is a perfect example, when made mention there from the CEO that Newcastle was contacted, and Newcastle wasn't even aware that there was a sister city relationship, and said, if you'd like to apply to be a sister city with Newcastle, here's the application process. But we already are a sister city, so not being aware of that. And that's where I suppose point 1 is the most important. A report to council regarding the current status of all 9 sister city relationships involving Dubbo Regional Council, including the former Dubbo City and Wellington Council. That makes sense to have a look at that and see where they're at. Now, when we jump to point 3, just to pick up on Councillor Wells' point and Councillor Black's point, the Mayor's point, Council consider the outcomes of the report where appropriate, very important, where appropriate, initiate steps to either formalise an MOU, to make it an active partnership, whatever that active partnership looks like and feels like that's of mutual benefit, that's important. Engage with cities linked to dormant relationships to determine their interest. Why have them sitting in our books if we're not going to be engaged? Why have something sitting there, leaving it? And then the last step, only if everything else has gone through, then politely discontinue ties where mutual engagement. We're not going to cut them off at the knees and say, we don't want anything to do with you anymore. If mutually the city says, we didn't even know you were a city, we've had nothing to do with you, it doesn't make sense. We can't even find the document where it was signed. Well, why don't we both agree, and only by mutual engagement where it's no longer feasible or relevant. So that all makes sense, I think, to go through and just tidy up this. What I hope comes out of this is a strong relationship with whatever cities we end up with, and then look to how that looks, how the shape of that, and then to go forward with some other relationships where those ones are appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. I've opened the electronic voting. Please cast your votes. Councillors, I will close the electronic voting. Carried 6 votes to 5. The next item of business is item CCL 25/6, which is Concrete Works Lot 2101 and Lot 211, 19L to 20L Sheraton Road, Dubbo. The applicant being Regional Hard Rock and the owner being Regional Hard Rock Proprietary Limited. Councillors, do I have someone to move that motion? Moved Councillor Richardson, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wright, thank you. Councillor Richardson, would you like to speak to that motion?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate, councillors? There being none, councillors, I've opened the electronic voting. Please cast your ballots. Councillors, I'll close the voting. Carried unanimously. The next item is item CCL 25/7 Draft Planning Agreement VPA 24-001 Concrete Works 19L and 20L Sheraton Road, Dubbo. Councillor
So
Toynton
move. Oh, sorry.
has an alternative motion.
Okay.
Councillor Toynton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have an alternative motion for CCL 25/7. 1, that a draft planning agreement be prepared generally in accordance with the updated terms identified in this report and the letter of offer provided by Regional Hard Rock Proprietary Limited, attached in Appendix 1. 2, that the $124,000 contribution of the upgrade of Sheraton Road be paid to council within 30 days of the issue of notice of determination for the development application D22-528. 3, that a further report be presented to council for consideration if a planning agreement cannot be successfully negotiated. 4, that a draft planning agreement and explanatory note prepared in accordance with the terms identified in this report be placed on public exhibition in accordance with the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. 5, that following the conclusion of the public exhibition period, a further report be presented to council for consideration, including any submissions received.
Thank you. A seconder, councillors? Councillor Wells, thank you. The mover, Councillor Toynton, would you like to speak to that motion?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. The CEO will just explain the difference quickly in that motion.
So what Councillor Taunton has read out, the subtle difference, if you weren't listening carefully, is to get the payment up front. Currently in the papers, it is split between an amount, a smaller amount up front, and then another amount in 12 months. So what's been put in front of you as an alternative motion is to get that complete payment up front in one term. So that's the difference from what's in the business papers. Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wright?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. It was just a question more with respect to that further report to council, point 3, I think it might have been on that. I don't have that in front of me, that new motion. So point 3, which refers to a report. I think can you talk to me what the purpose of that was and what that was about?
So that was in the original motion. It was
the
point
same
2.
one?
Yep. That a further report be presented to council for consideration if a planning agreement cannot be successfully negotiated. So it was insert point 2 and shuffle everything down 1.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Dickerson?
A question, thank you, Mr Mayor. So obviously in the report it talks about the $44,000 within 30 days of the DA consent and then $80,000 within 12 months. And obviously the CEO just explained that the staff would prefer that all to be up front. So I'm intrigued about the discussions we've already had, whether they were aware that that was a payment plan, whether the discussion had been previously about it all being paid up front, or whether that's something new that we've just introduced now. And I'm concerned, is there any reason, do we not think they're going to pay that in 12 months' time? What's the reason to get that money up front, given the fact I assume that the discussions so far have been with that 12-month delay?
To the CEO.
The original proposal was for over a much longer period, I believe 3 years, so it's got down that. So it's a choice for council as the elected body in terms of what they would like. Selfishly, from a council and a community financial perspective, I'd rather the money sitting with council earlier in a process than later. So it's as simple as that. But it is council's choice. So you always, like many VPAs, which councils from the previous term would remember, staff can get it to a certain point, but then it's up to councillors about where they wish to go to.
Any further debate, councillors? There being none. Councillor Toynton, right of reply to anything said there?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. All good.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll now put the motion. I've opened the electronic voting. Councillors, I'll now close the voting. Carried 10 votes to 1. Item CCL 25/8, comments and matters of urgency. We'll now move around the room for any comments or matters of urgency, starting with Councillor Ryan.
No, I'm all good. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
No, I'm fine too. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's not a lot to report, but just really wanted to say welcome back to 2025 for councillors and council staff. Hopefully we've got a good year ahead of us. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dickerson.
I just got two things, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Just first one, I just want to publicly thank my wife. We had our 30th wedding anniversary last week. For the majority of the time we've been married, I've been on council, so she's had to put up with all the constant discussions about council and the being pulled up in supermarkets. So thank you to my darling wife and also my 4 children who, again, for the vast majority of their lives, they've experienced their father on council. And the common joke with my kids when I'd say I'll just duck in and get a litre of milk from the supermarket is we'll see you in an hour, Dad, because you can't get into a supermarket without running into someone. I ducked in very quickly last week, very embarrassed. I had socks and sandals on just yesterday and ran into Councillor Toynton. So you can't do anything in a supermarket double without getting pulled up by someone, have a quick chat to them. So thank you to my wife, thank you to my children for putting up with me for all that time I've been putting into the community in council. The second one isn't quite as pleasant, and I'm a bit disappointed about the media release that went out on the 13th of January, and I have emailed this to you, Mr. Mayor, about this. And this is the media release in relation to the GIPA. And there's a couple of parts that I'm concerned about with this. The first one is that we're lodging a GIPA on the state government in the first place. This is a project, this is the sports hub we're talking about. This is a project that council of the day, 2 councils ago, washed their hands of in 2019 and said, we don't need to be a part of the sports hub. PCYC, Charles Street University can go ahead. They don't need council's involvement in it. Then at the 11th hour, council has gotten back involved in this process and pushing for the community. I don't have a problem with that. The way we're doing it, though, I'm not sure is the correct way. And when I read this media release, which again, councillors didn't know about the GIPA, councillors didn't know about this going out, it seems like it's deliberately inflammatory. We're publicly questioning a minister of the Crown, which I'm disappointed about, and I don't think it's appropriate for council and for our spokesperson, the mayor, to be publicly questioning, especially with language such as, is there something to hide? Making a veiled accusation to a minister of the Crown, which again is a bit disappointing. It talks about here the community has not been provided with a clear explanation, but then goes on further to say that the minister in the release outlined cost blowouts, delays and scope revision. So it gave information there. It keeps talking about a whole range of reasons as to why it was pulled and no one was told about it, but it seems pretty obvious to me that the project is on a new site and everyone knew that once you moved it to a new site that you would be losing the funding because it's a complete new application process to go through. So putting a GIPA in on the state government is one thing, but then broadcasting it and attacking a minister of the Crown, I think is disappointing. Making accusations about not getting transparent information, talking about it being refused when really they're asking for a payment. It's not how I would like to see a relationship with this council with our state government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Wells has said and welcome everyone back to 2025. Thank you to everybody that's put up with me last year, and I will get better this year. And I look forward to all 11 of us working cohesively together for the betterment of this LGA. And while I disagree with what Councillor Dickerson has said about the media release, personally, I will support this sports hub and the fight to get it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cowley.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ivey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief mention of our upcoming Australia Day celebrations. I think Wellington, as everyone knows, is having the celebration of the 26th of January on the eve of Australia Day, with the ceremony, the awarding of the Citizen of the Year and various community service awards, and also being part of or listening to our Australia Day ambassador, which I think we've been very fortunate this year of being appointed Ron Delizio as being our ambassador. He's an inspirational person, and I think really it's great that Australia Day can be celebrated in Wellington with an ambassador of his calibre. So I really look forward to perhaps even reporting at the next meeting of the outcome of our Australia Day celebrations. Thank you.
Councillor Chowdhury.
No, all good, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Oh, yes. Thank you, everyone. It's good to see you back. I hope you have a good time. Thank you for what you others shared. I'd just like to thank the Mayor for the tireless efforts and the amazing work that he put into trying to save the the sports centre. I think it would have been a wonderful thing, and Dubbo would have benefited. And I know it was a bit of a checkered past, and you know, there was some, how would you call it, toing and froing, but I think the Mayor did put in an amazing effort to try, and I just wanted to thank him for it.
Thank you, Councillor Toynton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. Just welcome back to everyone and a happy new year. And it's great to see that everyone's all back and refreshed and we kick off and get things rolling. The second thing is just in relation to Councillor Dickinson's remarks about the sports hub. I 100% commend our Mayor for trying to fight as hard as he has to support this project, and that by any means necessary. GIPA documents is, if a document exists, anyone can request it. Our emails, anything that we ever type, someone can sit and say, hey, I want to have a look at that. So I congratulate our Mayor for attempting to secure this funding for the sports hub and to pursue the fight for the sports hub. I think it is important that we don't just let this die and think, oh, well, it's gone, let's move on. The absolute pressure that has been applied by our Mayor to fight for this has been immense. So I congratulate our Mayor. And just finally, a public thank you. Recently, I went down to Sydney to have a little bit of a miniature holiday, so only 2 days. But while I was there in Parramatta, I got stuck at a bridge. The police had it closed for whatever reason that was happening. We had a detour. I'm not familiar with the area. The GPS is saying go across the bridge, so you can't tell it to the police there. But I had a fellow pull up in the car park next to me, and I told him, look, I'm from Dubbo. I'm trying to get around here. And he said to me, look, just follow me. I'll go out of my way and take me to Bankstown. I did get the fellow's name, Michael. So if you are watching on the live stream or any of the archive footage in years to come, Michael, thank you very much. That is the Australian spirit, and it's great to see. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, look, I wasn't going to say anything because I was hoping for a short meeting, but I will make a brief comment on the sports hub, where that's up to. And I thank some councillors for their comments. Yes, the sports hub, don't talk about it in the past tense. It's still ongoing. There's still hope because the money is still sitting, as far as we know, in the Office of Sport account. And until that money has been removed, it's still sitting there and it can still be allocated to something here in Dubbo. Now, as for the assertions that by Councillor Dickinson that it wasn't a variation, it seems to be only the Minister, Tara Moriarty, Councillor Dickinson and maybe one other from a previous extraordinary meeting seem to believe that it's not a variation. When you talk to people involved in grants that have been involved in grants for many, many years through councils and the like, it's a simple variation. It does not require a whole new application. Another thing to note is that Minister Tara Moriarty's media release announcing that the money had been hooked from the Dubbo regional community did not mention anything about the variation that had been applied for by the PCYC up to the Sports World site. It only talked about the cost blowouts at the CSU site. So to just say that the minister can just do whatever she wants, blah, 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 and we can't push back, well, no, I'm going to push back. We've been elected to actually fight for our community, to try and get the best things for our community. So I'm not just going to sit back with nearly $50 million taken away from the youth of the region and just do nothing. As for the GIPA, let's see what she based her, the advice, if you want to call it that, on to make this decision. So to say, she didn't say it in the media release, but we've heard it through other channels, that the variation was not treated as a variation, it was treated as a whole new project. But let's actually see that. And I've said before, I'd be happy for a parliamentary inquiry where I get to go down and give sworn evidence to the Parliament of New South Wales, and I doubt that the Minister might exactly want me to go and do that. So whenever we can show that we're still serious through GIPAs on the government and those sort of actions, then there's a higher likelihood that we'll probably get the money back to avoid a parliamentary inquiry. So there's two ways you can do this. You can just sit back passively and do nothing, or actively encourage the government in their actions of taking money away, or you can actually stand up and say, no, we're not going to put up with this. We're going to do everything we can to try and get that money back for our community. And that's the course of action that I'm prepared to take, and many others are on this council, and I thank you all for that. That ends the comments and matters of urgency section. Oh, quickly, the airport grant. It was fantastic that we got the airport grant and $14.6 million for the runway strengthening. That is a real bonus for the community because we basically see our airport upgraded at minimal cost to ratepayers, and we'll be able to land heavier aircraft and take off heavier aircraft. And stage 2, we may even see funding for a lengthening of the runway where we could land larger passenger jets. So biggest federal grant ever received by council, and that also contrasts with what was one of the biggest state grants ever that was taken away from Dubbo and the youth of the region with the Sports Hub funding. Next, we have confidential items. There are a fair few to get through. Under Section 10A of the Local Government Act, the next items being CCL 25/9, 10, 11, 12 and 13 have been identified as likely to be discussed in a closed session of Council. Can I now have someone move us into confidential session to deal with the confidential items, please? Moved Councillor Butler, seconded by Councillor Ivey. We have no applications from members of the public to make their representations regarding whether the meeting... Oh, we've had no applications regarding whether the meeting should be closed to the public. Do any members in the public gallery have any comments to make regarding the proposal to hear the items in the closed session of Council under Section 10A(4) of the Act? No. I'll now put the motion. Electronic voting is now open. Please cast your votes for going into confidential session. I'll now close the voting. Carried unanimously. And the time is 6:10 p.m. according to the little clock here. The streaming will now be turned off. Any members of the public will be asked to leave the chamber. The chamber will be reopened and the live stream restarted after deliberations on the confidential matters, with the resolutions to be made public. Please stop the web streaming. streaming. The council returned to open session, the time being 6:17 p.m. Welcome back. I now ask the Governance Officer to play the resolutions from the confidential session. There are no further items for consideration of the ordinary council meeting, and I declare the meeting closed, the time being 6:18 p.m. The web streaming has now been completed. Thank you for your attendance. Please stop the web streaming.